Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me either this evening or this afternoon or this morning. For me, it's morning. So thank you so much for joining me. And I'm just having a look at the chat and I can see so many people from the Americas region. So thank you so much for joining me again. Okay, so Lorenzo just indicated that on this slide we do have certificates of attendance. We've got questions at the end as well. And in case some of your colleagues want to watch this recording, we're going to be releasing the recording as well. So welcome, everybody. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about me and who I am. So my name is Jennifer, and I'm a part-time instructor at the University of Hong Kong. I teach on the Masters of Education program, and we actually just held a wonderful virtual practicum. Because schools are closed at the moment, they couldn't get into schools to hold their practice. So we just enjoyed a wonderful virtual practicum. I'm also the proud co-author of 4 OUP books. And I want to shout out, I think I can see an author here in this on this chat here. Hi, Ellen. Lovely to see you. And I do also have a couple of research areas that I'm interested in. So one of the research areas is educational technology, and I'm finding that I'm trying to support schools at this very challenging time of the online learning environment. And my other passion and research area is really about teaching for conceptual understanding and helping our students have those light bulb moments and understanding the reasons why they're learning something and trying to engage their intellect when we're actually designing learning experiences. So they're my 2 research areas. Please feel free to tweet during this talk. So I've got my Twitter handle here. And if you have any insights that you want to share with the Twitter sphere, please feel to tweet at any time. And if you don't tweet, you can always contact me at my website, which is jenniferchangwathall.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. So please feel free to connect. I invite you to ask me lots of questions and we can, try and have a lovely conversation about e-learning and effective learning practices. Okay, so before we actually start with the top 10 tips for teaching, I'd like to find out a little bit about you. So I'm going to ask Lorenzo to launch a little poll for you to answer. And I'm really curious to see where people are from. It's lovely to see the chat box and for people to tell me that they're in all sorts of places in the Americas region. In particular, South America, I can see a lot of people. So I've got 3 questions here. And I'm just going to give you a few minutes, maybe a minute to answer. And I think Lorenzo, when you think enough people have answered, let me know, and then we can share the results. Oh, hello from Turkey, Ecuador, Dominican Republic. Some beautiful places around the world. Okay, shall we have a look at the poll results? Yeah, let's see. Okay, so we have some people from Asia. It's pretty early in Asia. It's 6 a.m. for me, so I hope that you haven't gotten up too early. Okay, we have some from the Middle East. Great. So it's mainly that's above. So it's South America. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. And some from Australasia as well. So it's a little bit later in the morning for Australasia. Wonderful. Now, what about your situation, your school? Has your school closed? Okay, so the majority of people's schools has closed. And are you excited about today's webinar? I'm so glad the majority said yes. And then a few people said, maybe I'll tell you later. So hopefully they're going to change their minds. So I'm pretty excited. Let's go back to, yep, wonderful. Thank you, Lorenzo. I'm pretty excited to share some of these insights, and I'm going to ask for some feedback and interaction from you during this time as well. But I think before I share these top tips with you, I want to share a quote from Maya Angelou, who I think really encapsulated the essence of teaching in this quote. She said, "At the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did. They'll remember how you made them feel." And I think it's an honor and it's a privilege to be a teacher. I think that relationship and how you make your students feel cannot be replaced by a robot, a video, a textbook. And I think that's why we'll never lose our jobs, fortunately. I think that we'll always have such an important role in society and helping learning and our students develop for the future. And so it's so important to remind us that we're there. I think a lot of us became teachers because of the human element that we actually bring to the classroom, and the relationships that we nurture, and the respect, and just the rapport that we try to build with our students. And I'm going to be emphasizing that in my top tips, and reminding us that, you know, the reason why we came into teaching is really about how we make our students feel and how they make us feel as well. Okay, so let's get down to the top tips. I'm going to just give an overview of how I've separated my top tips. So I've got synchronous sessions, there's 5, and I have asynchronous sessions. So synchronous opportunities are when you do have the chance to see your students face to face in real time online. And I know that we don't all have that opportunity because of accessibility issues, and sometimes, you know, in homes there might be just one mobile device, or there might be one laptop or one computer that the entire family has to share. And we know that a lot of parents now are staying at home and working from home, so sharing those resources among a whole family can be quite challenging, as well as bandwidth issues. So I'm going to talk about synchronous sessions as a hope that we can at least have some kind of contact, a touch point with our students at some time. Okay, so I'm going to go through the first 5 synchronous top tips first. Number 10, my number 10 top tip is plan for a modified face-to-face timetable. So I'm saying that whatever timetable you had in the brick and mortar situation, do not transfer that exact timetable to the virtual online environment, because you'll find that the workload for students will be immense, and they will feel completely overwhelmed. Let's say if you had 5 to 6 to 8 subjects per day in secondary, can you imagine the preparation? Can you imagine even just the parents trying to support their child in this kind of environment if we run the same timetable as we did in the brick and mortar? So some schools in Asia are actually in their 8th to 9th week of online teaching, and they have really gone through some trials and tribulations, but come out with a lot of wonderful advice. And I know that some schools actually started off running the exact same timetable. So they tried to run the lessons even real time in a synchronous session. And they found that student motivation really dropped by the 2nd week. And, you know, students will have a choice at home whether they want to engage or not. And after the 2nd week, students became quite engaged, unmotivated, and it was quite challenging to try and run exactly the same brick and mortar timetable in the virtual online environment. So I'm recommending plan for a modified timetable where, you know, you are going to give your students a schedule every day, but it's not going to be the same schedule. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about what that schedule can look like if it's modified. Okay, so that's top 10. Plan for a modified face-to-face timetable, not the please don't translate or transfer your brick and mortar timetable to the virtual online environment. Okay, top tip number 9. If you are going to be running synchronous sessions and you're seeing your students either face-to-face or you can hear them, I suggest that you use the chat function, like what we're doing here. So with the chat function, you can have lots of parallel conversations where students can help each other. So let's say a student really is stuck, they don't understand the instructions of a particular task, or they need some support. Rather than the teacher or me answering and trying to monitor all of the questions on the chat, we take like a community of responsibility, a collaborative approach where we try and help anyone that asks questions on the chat. And that can be so powerful. I find it extremely powerful in my workshops where people can't find this button or they can't find that activity, or, they just need some support and some help from their peers. And so I suggest that you fully utilize the chat function and any software that you use. And I'm going to invite you to fully use the chat function today, a little bit later with something that's a little bit more specific. Okay, so that's the top tip number 9. Let's see. Top tip number 8 is talk in 8 to 12-minute blocks. And I'm going to try and model that today as much as possible. So you'll find that in the online environment, students, have the choice to listen, to engage. They can easily turn their cameras off, mute themselves, and not engage. And so if we want them to be highly motivated in this environment, we don't want to be talking for long lengths of time. And I think if you are going to be talking for long lengths of time and giving a lecture or giving some kind of information, there are much better resources on the internet that actually will deliver better quality and better content than I think I could. So for example, Sal Khan does a fantastic, a much better job than I do at trying to explain different mathematical concepts. And so I wouldn't dream of trying to, create my own 60-minute videos for students to watch, or even lecture when they're seeing me in a face-to-face synchronous session. And so if we try to use that flipped classroom approach where students are watching longer videos by themselves, perhaps, and when they meet you, it's really about unpacking the conceptual understandings and any misconceptions that they may have about the topic, then I think students are going to find that more engaging, especially if we try and promote more interaction. So if I'm only talking in 8 to 12-minute blocks, that means that the students have to be active participants, and they have to be talking in groups and collaborating as well, so that they have to be more engaged by the design of your learning engagement on the synchronous face-to-face platform. Okay, so talking in 8 to 12-minute blocks. I'm going to keep an eye on the time and make sure that I don't go too much over as well. Okay, so let's go to top tip number 7. Plan to 1/3 to half your normal content. And a lot of teachers around the world are really surprised by this top tip. And it's we, in Asia, learnt the hard way. We tried to cover exactly the same lessons and content and units. And in the virtual online environment and under these circumstances, these devastating circumstances around the world, it's just not possible. Things are going to take longer. There are digital tools that students have to learn. Teachers have to learn. It's a huge learning curve. And then parents have to learn and support as well. And so we want to be able to manage this transition to the online environment as smoothly as possible so that people don't feel overwhelmed. I think the first stage of adopting an e-learning environment is about that survival mode where you're in firefighting mode. What tools am I going to use? What learning management system am I going to use? And I think we need to be really making sure that we do not overwhelm our students with too much content, because at the end of the day, it's about the quality of the learning and not the quantity of the learning. So we want to focus on deep, conceptual, high-level learning rather than just content coverage and trying to cover as much content as possible. I know that many systems around the world have removed their standardized test. I'm so happy about this. This is something that educators have been talking about for years. And so I know that many standardized tests at the moment have been cancelled because of the circumstances. And I see that as the shackles being removed. And for us to be able to have the freedom to nurture a love of learning for the sake of learning. And when have we ever been in a situation where we can actually just nurture a love of learning without having to worry about a standardized exam? And so I really wouldn't worry about content coverage in this circumstance, and just focus on the love of learning and the sense of belonging. Okay, so let's go to the next top tip. Top tip number 6 is, now this is if possible, please make sure that your students have their video camera on if this is possible. I know that sometimes in terms of accessibility, there's only one device per family, if even that. Or I know in some places it's so hard to even get good Wi-Fi to be able to have a face-to-face session. But if you are able to have a face-to-face session, please ensure that everyone has their camera on. Some places, I think it's starting around the world, some places and some people have experienced deep isolation. And we don't know how long this is going to go on for. I know that here schools are closed until the end of May. Some other places around the world are talking about at least 6 months, which means that your students are not going to have human contact or see another human for quite a long time. And the value of seeing somebody's face and that connection is so important. I think that we're born as social beings, and as humans, we need to have personal and human contact and interaction. And so if possible, you do decide to meet your students, or you're able to meet your students, and I'm not suggesting every day, but if you do have a touch point where you touch base with your students, please make sure that they have their cameras on so that you can all see each other. Okay, so they were the first 5, and they were all about the synchronous opportunities that we could give our students if we're able to in terms of accessibility. I think it's time for us to digest and process a little bit now, and I know that there's quite a few tweeters out there. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to tweet. What was your takeaway so far for the synchronous tips? And I'm going to go through the top 5 in case, just as a reminder, in case you've forgotten. And I would love you to be able to use these 2 handles, so my handle and the Ox Uni Press handle as well, and to hashtag transform learning, transform pedagogy. So I'm trying to create a global movement where we are transforming learning and transforming pedagogy for the better, so that we can actually enhance learning and motivate and engage our students and prepare them for this unknown world of what's happening. So what were those top 5? Let me just go back so that you can see. So the top 5 were modified schedule, use the chat function as a parallel conversation, make sure that, what was 8 actually? Let me see, what was 8? 8 was talk in 8 to 12 minute blocks. I'm hoping to model that today. That was talking to 8 to 12 minute blocks. Number 7 was plan for a third to half the content that you would normally cover. And number 6 is, if you're going to have the opportunity to see your students, try to encourage that the cameras are on, and you keep your camera on to model that. Okay, so they're the top 5. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes now. Now, if you don't tweet, don't worry. Please put your takeaway in the chat box, and I'm going to try and read some out. So take it away. Let me see. What was your takeaway so far from the synchronous top tips? Lots of lovely comments here. Oh, I've got to scroll all the way down because I think there's a few hundred comments. Yeah. Yeah. What was your takeaway? So I'm going to start reading them out. Okay. Quality over quantity. Beautiful. I think that's really important. Good. My takeaway is that my school is doing everything right. Excellent. I'm so happy to hear that, Ellen. And not yet, do not run the same timetable as what you've been doing. Great. Big takeaway from Maria, reducing the content. Yep, plan a quarter to a half. Excellent. What else do we have? Yeah, be interactive as much as possible from Edwin. Beautiful. A lot of people saying about the content, and I think that was quite a light bulb for a lot of teachers when they embarked on their journey. Yeah, take away, see students' faces. You know, our students are going to be isolated. I know some in China have been isolated for 2 months now without any human contact. So we just want to be able to, nurture that human interaction. Oh, good. Felix said his takeaway was the 8 to 10 minute blocks. Exactly. Yeah, humanized teaching. Exactly. We're not robots, right? And we don't want our students just to have a delivery of content from an AI robot. And I think a lot of us went into teaching because we love being around students and we love to nurture the love for learning. So I think let's remind ourselves of why we're with our students face to face, great, and the human connection. Beautiful. Okay. Thank you for those. And with the tweets, I'm going to check them a little bit later. I can see that the Twitter sphere is going crazy as well with wonderful takeaways. If you do have questions, I'm going to try and answer some questions at the end. But the previous webinar that we had with OUP, we had lots of questions and the conversation was moved to Twitter, which is wonderful. So please feel free to connect with me on Twitter and ask any questions there. Oh, beautiful. Look at this. This is beautiful. Today we had a virtual meeting and helping each other through the chat just arose naturally. It does. Collaborative work is to be worked on, in this context. Beautiful, Maria. The chat, rather than saying to students, oh, concentrate on what's going on here, don't do the chat. The chat actually provides a very powerful forum as a parallel resource when you're in online environment. Exactly. So, yep, keep that. All right. Beautiful. Okay, so let me try and share the other 5 top tips, and I have a little bonus for you as well a little bit later. Okay, so this one I'm going to explain. This is to do with asynchronous sessions. So when your students are just learning from the resources that you're providing and they're not meeting you face to face necessarily, they're completing their work ubiquitously. That means anytime, anywhere. I suggest 2 very important top tips. One is to do with the landing page. So I'm going to talk about the landing page first. And on Twitter, I can, share some wonderful landing pages from different schools. So a landing page is one-stop shop. And I think it's important that we give students, we give teachers, and we give parents a one-stop shop. So we don't want them to be going to 10 different platforms and trying to learn many, many different digital tools. We just want one platform, one page, and beautiful landing page that links to every single resource that is necessary to support the whole school community. And so landing pages a lot of the time will reflect the school ethos. That's pretty important. There'll be a section for parents. There'll be a section for students and how they can access their learning and their weekly schedules. And there'll also be a section for teachers. And maybe that's a lot of tech support and, the pedagogical approaches that are effective in the e-learning environment. So please feel free to connect with me on Twitter, and I can share some of the wonderful landing pages from different schools from around the world. So a one-stop shop, okay? That's my big recommendation. The other one now, which is more specific to learning experiences and designing learning experiences, is a hyperdoc. So a hyperdoc is like a landing page, but it's designed for one or a series of learning experiences. So it is a document. It could be a Google Slides, a Google Doc, or even a PDF with links. But these links actually lead students to an integrated, high-level, coherent approach to a particular conceptual understanding. So you decide what the conceptual understanding is that you want your students to take away from these learning experiences, and you design these learning experiences that involve multimedia. So they're going to have videos, they're going to have meaningful links to websites. So it's going to be quite specific and intentional in the design. And it's a one-stop shop. So the landing page is a one-stop shop for the school community. The hyperdoc is really a one-stop shop for the student when you're designing learning experiences. And a hyperdoc could be one lesson or a series of lessons. I suggest that there are a series of lessons so that students have a period of time to be able to really investigate and research and go through that inquiry process to be able to produce, the product and come to that conceptual understanding that you want them to come to. So that's my top tip number 5, asynchronous sessions, hyperdoc or landing page. My headline here is one-stop shop for top tip 5. Okay, so let's go to number 4. And this happened to me yesterday, and it happened to me last week. Be patient and kind to yourself if technology gremlins visit. And I shouldn't even be putting if, it's when, because it's going to happen. No matter what, technology gremlins are going to come and visit you sometime. I think in yesterday's webinar, we had, over 4,000 people try and log on to this website. And it, of course, naturally, it crashed. And we're going to find a lot of digital resources now online are going to crash, not because of the fault of the actual digital tool, but, there's only so much capacity that the entire world can take in terms of the bandwidth and in terms of any tool. So we have to just be patient and kind if the technology doesn't work. So I was running a workshop last week and everyone was in a group of 4. And I had one group where 3 people's microphones were not working and one person's was. So how do you facilitate group work when 3 people's microphones weren't working? So they raised their hand virtually. So I went into the room and they told me, the person with the mic told me the problem. And then I said, okay, why don't you use the chat function within your group? And the 3 of you type, and the person that has the mic can talk so that you're still collaborating, you're not wasting this time together, and you're still trying to enhance your students' learning and continue their learning so it just doesn't stop, so we don't give up. So we have to be patient and kind to ourselves. We've got to be really patient and kind with our students, especially if you've already given the instruction to something and they ask you again, what is the instruction? Because in the virtual environment, what I found is you have to repeat things about 3 times, but different ways. So you have a visual, so that there's visual stimulation. Then you have to be able to speak verbally as well. And sometimes you have to have it in a text form when they're in their groups because they may forget what you've said. So you've got to have, a lot of different ways to reinforce instructions and ideas with your students. So be patient and be kind when the technology doesn't work. Okay, so that's top tip number 4. That happens to me every day. Okay, this one, top tip number 3. Give students a thinking partner. So this is to do with the isolation that a lot of students are in and teachers and families are in at the moment. And we found that motivation levels can really drop off by about the second or third week, and engagement levels actually also decrease. So how can we keep our students motivated and excited about learning with you? I think in the virtual environment, it's important that you give your student a thinking partner, a thought partner, or a study buddy, someone that they can bounce ideas off and connect with regularly during the week when you're not meeting, and someone that will make them, I think, feel that there's a sense of belonging to the class or to the community. Now, I've also learned that in the virtual environment, not to make groups too big. So that's why I suggest just having one thinking partner. And I found that when you're going to do group work in the virtual environment, in the classroom situation, brick and mortar, 6 people could have been okay, the limit probably. But I found in the virtual environment, 2, 3, 4 maximum is probably the optimum number to have a productive group work under this situation. So just keep in mind that, if you try and facilitate your students to have a thinking partner, however you want to do that, whether it's by them choosing a partner, or if you think it's appropriate for you to, choose partners. Or I suggested last night that perhaps you can ask your students, well, I'm going to pair you up. How would you like me to pair you? Would you like to choose? Would you like to be randomly assigned? Would you like to change your thinking partner regularly? So asking your students what they want. And I think that's really important, constantly checking in with them and seeing, what's going to motivate and engage them in this online environment. Okay, so giving students a thinking partner. And I'm not sure if there's any primary teachers here, but I had a question as well from a primary teacher. And they said, what age should we start this? And I think it's up to, what you think is appropriate in terms of the age level, as long as there is a way for the students to be able to communicate somehow. And whatever tool they can use to communicate, then I think they can have a thinking partner. And so one teacher said to me, well, my child is 8 years old, 9 years old. I think that this could be a real game changer for them. If they had a thinking partner, they'd be so much more motivated under these circumstances. So give your students a thinking partner. That's top 3. Let's go to the top 2 tip about assessment. This is the biggest question and the most asked question that I get asked from teachers around the world. What are we going to do about assessment? So my top tip here is to rethink what assessment looks like and to create different assessment opportunities. So my recommendation is not going to be to have 2 cameras, one here and one here, monitoring student academic honesty. I think we need to move away from those types of assessments, and we need to think about assessments that utilize multimedia and the online virtual environment. So I've got some suggestions of this diagram, and I do release all my graphics on my social media, PDFs of them. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I share all of these in case you want any of these graphics. I want to focus on the formative assessment in this particular framework. So in the formative assessment, I recommend that we do not grade formative assessment, but it's a way for us to collect evidence of learning. So that's what I would like to focus on, those important words, collecting evidence of student learning. That's what we want to do, to inform our teaching and then to try and help our students understand on a deep conceptual level. And how can we collect evidence of student learning? I think we can ask them to audio record. We can ask them to just text as a discussion post, so, type. But I also think that we can ask them to make videos. And our students are a lot more comfortable at video themselves than we are. We're of a different generation where, we're probably a little more uncomfortable videoing ourselves. But our students, they're on Instagram, they're on Snapchat, they're on TikTok. And, they actually find videoing themselves fun and engaging. And so to ask your students to do that, I think, to help you identify where their learning is and what their understanding is a wonderful method and a wonderful way for you to formatively assess. So there are lots of tools out there. I think Flipgrid is probably one of the most popular at the moment. One that you don't need to sign on for is Padlet. And so if you've used Padlet, you can video, audio, you can put pictures, you can link to other Padlets, and you just have to share the URL, so students don't need to sign in or log in, and that's quite an easy one too. But there's also lots of other tools as well. And then we have the other opportunity for assessment, which is the e-portfolio. And I think that this is probably the most valuable type of assessment that we can use at the moment, where we're collecting evidence of student learning through a series of lessons, a series of engagements, a series of audio, video, and text engagements. And the students showcase their conceptual understanding through this e-portfolio that they have created over a number of weeks. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to the stage where every student will be able to have their own e-portfolio that showcases their learning. And I think the other big question that I keep getting is about summative assessments. How are we going to summatively assess? And I think we need to rethink what summative assessments look like too. And I'm going to be really trying to encourage teachers to move away from those quizzes, the examinations, the time tests with closed answers, closed questions and closed answers, but to move into more authentic performance assessment tasks, where we're giving students a role, an audience, a format, a topic, and some strong words to motivate them to engage. Now, this is not the only framework that we can use to design an authentic performance assessment task. There's also the wonderful GRASPS model by Wiggins and McTighe. And I also recommend looking at Stanford's design thinking process, which I know a lot of schools are adopting now. So that they provide a wonderful framework for students to be able to complete an authentic performance assessment task as well. Okay, so that's about assessment. Now, I've just come up to my number one top tip. What is, after all of these top tips, going to be my number one that I think is the most important, and probably what I really want everyone to take away from this webinar? So, number one, some drum roll. Number one top tip is monitor well-being and connect with your students. So we know that some of our students and families and us even are going to be isolated for a period of time that's unknown at the moment. And I think it's so important that we check in with our students. And that could be a phone call. So if it's not possible to have a video conferencing call, it could just be a phone call. It could be an email. And so especially if you haven't heard from one of your students, or you sense that one of your students is struggling through these very challenging times, I think it's really important that as teachers, we do check in and we monitor our students' well-being. I think, the online environment can be very challenging to promote that sense of community and that sense of belonging. And there are ways that we can really try and promote a sense of belonging and to help our students feel connected to us. And I think just as a teacher, just showing that care and checking in with a phone call or an email or a video call will really lift your students' spirits up. And I think that's what we all need at the moment. We all need our spirits to be lifted because it is a tumultuous time for us, I think emotionally, I think professionally, and our students are going through exactly the same tumultuous emotions as we are. And so if we're here as a community, connected, collaborating and sharing and supporting each other, I think together we're going to be able to get through and be stronger together. So my number one top tip is really keep an eye on the well-being of your students during this very challenging time and use any means to check in with them, to connect with them, whatever means you have. Okay, so that's my number one top tip here. Now it's time for us to process a little bit. But, you know, on that note of monitoring well-being, I just want to come back to Maya Angelou's quote that I started with, that at the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did. They'll remember how you made them feel. And can you imagine how you're going to make your student feel when you do that check-in, when you actually give them a phone call or you just drop them a little message? And, you know, to know that, well, for them to know that you care as their teacher, and even for your classmates, if you can get students and classmates together in some kind of synchronous opportunity. So it may not be face-to-face, and it may not be for very long. It may be just to connect on a social level and to help with emotional well-being. Then I do recommend it. I do recommend it. So I just want to come back to this very important and very powerful quote from Maya Angelou. Now, let's see. I'm going to go to the light bulb moment now because I've just gone through the asynchronous top tips, and then I have a little bonus for you a little bit later. So what was your light bulb moment? Here are the Twitter handles and the hashtags. Remember, we're trying to create this global movement, transform learning, transform pedagogy. So what were the top tips? Let me just review them so that we can give ourselves a reminder. So this number 5 was about landing pages and hyperdocs, basically a one-stop shop for your whole school community, and also for your students in terms of their learning experiences. Number 4 was just be patient and kind to yourself and your students when technology gremlins visit. Number 3 was have your students, try to group your students into pairs and have each student have a thinking partner, a thought partner, or a study buddy. Number 2 was really about rethinking assessment and not having 2 cameras to monitor academic honesty, but to rethink how can we collect evidence of student learning. And then my number 1 top tip is really monitor the well-being of your students, check in on them using any means that you can. So I'm going to just give you a couple of minutes to do that, your light bulb moment. And I'm going to read out some. Let me see if I can see any on Twitter. I'm going to go on. Oh, yep, Twitter's going crazy at the moment. And we'll just load these. Oh, lovely. This is from Constance. Rethink, collect evidence of student learning. Beautiful. And move away from traditional assessment. Thank you, Constance. I love it. We've got Mel A. I had not thought of Padlet before. Beautiful. I had been using Flipgrid, but students had problems with the app, unfortunately. Yeah, so Padlet, we don't need to actually sign on. You know, the log-on issue sometimes is a little bit of a stumbling block for students, right? So we can do that. What else? I'm going to read some more from Twitter. Oh, Mel, I did not think of allocating a study buddy. Yeah, because some of them are so isolated. And so, you know, just for them to have someone, a partner that they can share, not just the learning, you know, that you're designing, but maybe just some emotional support as well. Wonderful. Okay, Coach Maria. Takeaway, plan 1/3 to half of your normal lessons. Oh, yep. Okay, so that was a previous one. Excellent. Thank you, Marlene. She's saying she loves this workshop. Let's see, what else have we got? Oh, yeah, Mari, we're social beings more than content mind, human content regarding distant learning. So human contact, sorry. So thank you, Mari. It really is about human contact, I think. So when you meet your students face to face, it's about the human contact rather than getting through content. I love it. Absolutely love it. Magdalene, quality of learning and human connection. Thank you. And is it Aeneas? Talk 8 to 12 minutes, plan half. Exactly. Let me come to the chat box because I think that's going crazy as well. Let's go to the chat box. Yes. Oh, this is nice. Kelly's given a suggestion for assessment. I've been trying to make assignments that involve critical thinking because it's now too easy for them to cut and paste answers from websites. Exactly. So we don't want them regurgitating information from websites that's readily available. We want to engage the intellect and promote that critical thinking. I love that idea. Could I repeat steps 9 and 10? Of course I can. So 9 and 10 were, what are they? Modified timetable here. So don't try to plan for the exact same timetable you had. And number 9 was the chat. So this recording is going to be made available in case you forget. Beautiful. But so Giselle said the buddy partner is a great idea. Augustina, love and care for them when they've got trouble and reduce, what to a third, but, get to know it indeed. Excellent. Let me see. Oh, here we go. This is happening so quickly. There's hundreds. I've seen that there's 1,439 chats. Let me try and pick up some others. Yeah, monitor well-being. This is from Maria. Monitor well-being since our students may go through a tough and scary time, just like us, right? So monitor that well-being. Let go of what you can't control. Janice, excellent. And find ways to showcase student learning and listen to their voice. That is a beautiful, I think, so astute takeaway. Beautiful. And the chat function multiplies the learning from Sylvia. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so I have a little bonus guidance for you. I've said my top 10. But I've got a little bit of guidance for you in terms of what a blended learning environment looks like. So I've been sharing this graphic freely. Please feel free to distribute. If you go onto my Twitter page, I think I've got the link to download this as a PDF. And if you message me, I'm so happy to share this with you. But it's my recommendations and the important elements of what we should be including in a blended learning environment. And what do I mean by blended? I mean that we should be trying to combine that asynchronous learning with the synchronous learning, with some touch points where students can connect with you. And I know it's not always possible, but I'm going to suggest even just once per week or even twice per week. If you have the opportunity to have a face-to-face meeting, then please make the most of it and utilize that. And that's when we're going to promote this very important element of connection. So we want to make sure that students feel connected and a sense of belonging. So a lot of research has actually found that students in an online environment will disengage and feel highly unmotivated when they don't have a sense of belonging. So we need to ensure that we do have that sense of belonging and that we promote that connection. So that's a very important element of the blended learning framework and model. The other opportunity that you can provide for a face-to-face synchronous session is for clarification. So you might have like a weekly drop-in clinic for students to come and ask you questions, or if you want to do that that asynchronously, that's fine too, on an online discussion board where you can post questions up. If you're a Google Apps for Education school, which is completely free, then you may want to make use, of your Google Classroom as a discussion forum and questions. So we want to also be including the element of clarification for students in the online environment, because that is so much needed. And they're going to have a lot more questions in this environment. I think it's still important that we try to encourage as much collaboration. But as I said earlier, larger groups in the virtual environment don't actually work. So I say here, choose one, maximum two peers to work with. So they've got that thinking partner, the thought partner, the study buddy, or maybe a group of three if that's appropriate. So that they can check in with each other. They can go through the learning experiences together, and they could actually be completing a group project that lasts 2 to 3 weeks. Maybe it's one of the authentic performance assessment tasks, and they have to specify in the group what they've contributed specifically, so that as the pair or as the triad, what each person has completed. So we want to be promoting this element of collaboration so that their students are feeling not isolated and they had that study buddy. And then, of course, we want to engage the intellects, because they can Google and find, information on the web and copy and paste. So we need to be trying to encourage critical thinking and conceptual thinking. And this is where we can use those visible thinking routines or those conceptual questions to try and draw out and elicit those deep conceptual understandings that we want our students to be able to take away from the learning experiences that we design. So this is a suggestion of how we can promote 4 very important elements in the blended learning environment: connection, collaboration, clarification, critical thinking, and conceptual thinking. Okay, so now I think I'm going to take some questions. So Lorenzo, feel free to put the question and answer mode. Excellent. And I'm just going to click over here. I just learned how to do this yesterday. I think as teachers, we're lifelong learners, right? So I love learning about new tools. I usually use another video conferencing tool, and, I loved learning about this one. Okay, so there's 1,500 questions. Where do I start? Okay, let me see. Some quick ones that I'll just do without showing. How does Padlet work? So there are lots of instructional videos on different digital tools. So just Google and you will find some wonderful actual little instructional videos on YouTube, normally 2 to 3 minutes. And I suggest that you Google any tool that you want to find, or maybe you want a functionality and you don't know the tool, Google, and then something will come up. Yeah. Okay. So let me see. Oh, what tool am I using now? I'm using Click Meeting. So this is something that I've just learned about. I do normally use Zoom, and I was just talking to wonderful Lorenzo, and we were talking about different functionalities for different purposes. So if you are going to be holding a webinar or lecture, which actually I'm not recommending with your students because they're going to be disengaged. But if you have to give some kind of presentation to, some people, then I think this is a really powerful tool. My recommendation is going to be Zoom because it's more interactive with your students. You can actually create breakout rooms and, groups can talk and discuss and you can visit them. And so it depends on the purpose. I would never say that this tool is not good and this tool is good. There is no such thing as good and bad digital tools because they are inanimate objects. If you think about it, they're inanimate objects, so we cannot blame a tool if the learning doesn't go well. It's how we actually use that digital tool, right? And for the purpose that it's been designed for. So that's my philosophy about that. Rosanna asks, okay, so I'm going to publish this one. Rosanna asked ideal group size for synchronous sessions. Okay, so this answer is quite broad, my answer, because it depends on your situation. I have facilitated synchronous sessions for 120 people on Zoom. So if you're able to have the interactivity and the collaboration, then I don't see that there's a limit, to be honest. I think I can go up to 500 on my account. But I want to put a caveat here. Depends. It depends how many you have in your class. So in Asia, some classes are 45. I think that can be done if you have the collaboration tools, if you have the group work. I would not recommend that you have this format for 60 minutes with your students where, they can't talk to you and you can't see them. You want to be able to see them, right? And so I think it could be any number for a synchronous session. However, another caveat, some recommendations from software companies that have done their research, they say the magic number, guess what? Which I think can be bigger because I've done 120. They say the magic number is around 25. So they say the magic number is around 25 if you want to hear feedback from every single group. So when I facilitate professional development workshops of 120, we do not have every single group feeding back. We maybe have 3 groups feeding back to the whole group because of that size. So if you want every single group to have the opportunity to present, the magic number is apparently 25, but I'm hoping that you're not going to cap it at 25, okay? Just because that was the recommendation. Okay, beautiful question. Thank you, Rosanna. Yes. Okay, this is important. Okay, because I answered this yesterday. So Anahi, yes, these tips can be applied to primary school. However, in the blended learning model, I said to meet your students maybe once a week or twice a week. I know that primary school teachers are having touch points every day. And only for 10 to 15 minutes. So they might have a morning greeting. And they've said the feedback from students and teachers is that is the highlight of their day when they get to see their classmates and their teacher. And we have to be careful that when we do have those morning meetings, that it is about connection, right? It's not about trying to get through as much content. It may be clarifying some things, learning experiences for the week. It may be just, checking in with everyone, seeing everyone's faces. So I would say every single tip is applicable to primary school. Just that I think primary, maybe a check-in every day for 10 to 15 minutes is I've found to be really valuable. Okay, let me check on the time. I think I can take a few more. I'm going to go to this one, because this one really is quite an important. Are there any tips, webinars similar to this, but for kids who don't have much knowledge of apps? I think let's assume that teachers don't have much knowledge of apps. Let's assume students don't have much knowledge. Let's assume parents don't have knowledge. So that one-stop shop. So I'm not necessarily recommending that you go and find out about the 20 different digital tools that you can use in your classroom, right? In your virtual classroom. I'm suggesting we have a one-stop shop. So we have a landing page which is school-wide for the school community that has links to different resources for the different community groups. And I think to keep it simple, keep it really simple. If you're going to choose it, choose Padlet, and then that has most, functionalities to address all of the things I've discussed today. Choose one. Just choose one to start with. And then once you feel really comfortable with that, and, let's say this particular digital tool doesn't satisfy all of the functions that you want, then, explore and look at another one. So we don't want to overwhelm ourselves, I think, and we don't want to overwhelm our students or the parents who are trying to support at home and trying to work from home as well. And everyone's, sharing the bandwidth and all the devices as well. So keep it simple. That's my advice. Okay. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to recommend another resource. I don't normally recommend specific digital tools. I'm just talking about some general ones that a lot of people use that I've used, but they're not necessarily the one and only. And I'm not sponsored by any of these digital tools, just to let you know. I'm a user and I love user-friendly. For me, the easier, the better. I don't want to use anything complicated. So in primary school, is it possible to invite students to be in a group in a Google Classroom? I think you have to discuss that, because I've heard that there is an age restriction. You have to discuss that with your school community and the admin there, because I think that there are some primary schools in the world that do use it, but I don't know how they've gone through the protocols and discussion. I'm not sure how they've done that. But I can recommend a resource that is widely used, that's free, like Google Classroom, like Google Apps for Education, that is widely adopted, and it's called Seesaw. So if you want to investigate that, a lot of primary schools are using that. But in fact, Seesaw is K-12. So I don't understand why secondary schools have not picked up on Seesaw, but it's just so popular with primary schools. And that's probably, next to Google, the next most popular resource to use as a learning management system. Okay, so that's that one. Do I have time for one more? I think I've got time for one more. Let's do this one. Okay, any app suggested to work on the smartphone? Do you know, Alebi, I hope I'm saying your name right. Most digital tools will have an app on the smartphone. So Padlet has an app on the smartphone. All of the Google apps for education have apps. So any digital tool that you choose to use, at the end of the day, most likely will have an app. Flipgrid has an app, and I use that app. So every single digital tool actually has an app. Okay, so just choose one that's really simple and then stick with that. That's my recommendation. Okay, I think we've come to the end of our hour. Thank you so much. I've got a couple of things just to go through. First of all, we do really value your feedback. Please scan this code, or it says you can click on the link in the chat box on the bottom left of your screen. For me, it's on my bottom right. And please provide your feedback for this. I want to thank everyone for joining me in this hour. I know that everybody is so overwhelmed in terms of the workload and shifting to this online environment. And so your time is really precious. And for you to come and join me for this hour I feel really grateful that you're here. So thank you so much. Please connect with me on social media, and we can take this conversation and share more ideas and resources with each other. And I hope to see you soon. Please take care of your health. Please stay well. Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye.
On the screen that we've left here, we would love to hear what you thought. Please take a moment to complete the short feedback form by scanning either the QR code displayed on the screen or clicking the link in the chat box. We will also be sending a recording of the webinar at the end of the week to all of your registered email addresses. Again, we would like to thank you very much for joining us today. See you all very shortly.